All right, we're about a month away from training camp, month away from the season. I'll be on the scene. And right now, you're kind of resting your minds. We know football brings out a lot of emotions. It gets your mind flowing, a lot of things going on, and few things create emotion, takes, opinions, and criticism like Pro Football Focus. Pro Football Focus has put out their top 32 players at each position. We're going to focus on the offensive side of the rock today. Tomorrow, we'll focus on the defense and where the Texans rank. I actually think the defense might create more emotion than the offense, although that's hard to believe, especially with where we're going to start here. Before we get into this, I'll ask this question. What do you think of PFF? A lot of people have hot takes about PFF. My thing with PFF, it is what it is. It's not the gospel. You shouldn't treat it as such. So it shouldn't be some sort of end-all be-all. It's the guys obviously put in a lot of work. Now, there are flaws in the system, and sometimes there's some stuff that adds up to what you see on the field. I think whenever you follow a team closely, like I do the Texans, it's kind of easy to see where the weak spots are. For example, I think DBs is kind of a weak spot for them. There was a point where Tavier Thomas was like one of the highest rated corners in the league a few years ago, and anyone who saw that kind of rolled their eyes. There was also a time 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was, where Nick Martin was the fifth best center in the AFC South, and that seemed appropriate. So I think you take it for what it is. It's a good resource. It's a good conversation starter. There's always been an interesting relationship with the Texans and PFF, especially on the offensive line, because I remember Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard used to kind of criticize it. But whenever they had good ratings, that retweet would appear on the timeline. So it's kind of a love-hate thing, give or take. I do think the quality's gone down. I also think Texans folks probably don't like it as much because of,
damn it, Bobby,
offensive coordinator that you just got rid of, who created a lot of frustration last year. He actually worked at PFF before he started coaching. So PFF, interesting resource, creates a lot of discussion, and that's definitely going to be the case here. Now, what is this top 32 based off of? It's apparently based off of a combination of recent performance and career trajectory. So it's based on the recent season in which the player had, and then the trajectory of what they can or can't be, whatever. And there are some rookies on the list, but on the offensive side of the rock, there's some interesting things that stick out, starting with CJ Stroud. PFF has CJ Stroud ranked as the 14th best QB heading into 2025. And I can already see here in the comments section, people kind of getting fired up about this, but let's just kind of take a close look at what they say about CJ Stroud. They really just focus on how good he was his rookie year. They say that he's a cautionary tale for Jaden Daniels. And they obviously say, they state the obvious, that his offensive line got much worse last year, and he's very dependent on that offensive line. Now, this doesn't even factor in the shoulder stuff that we've been talking about this year. But here are the 14 guys that PFF has ahead of CJ Stroud heading into the season. Mahomes, don't think too many people would argue with that. Burrow, no argument here. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, no argument. Jalen Hurts just won a Super Bowl. Daniels coming off the year he did. Then you get to the part where you kind of embrace debate. Matthew Stafford, kind of on the back end. What is he going to look like with the Rams? Justin Herbert had a better regular season last year than CJ Stroud, but Stroud outperformed him in the postseason. Jared Goff, Geno Smith, that's where people get really angry. And then you have Brock Purdy and Jordan Love. So number 14 for CJ Stroud, 14th best quarterback. Is this rating fair or foul? I would say it's pretty foul. I would say CJ Stroud's closer to, he's inside that top 10. And the problem with definitely and defiantly saying that he's in the top 5, top 8, is we don't know what the offensive line is going to be. We've never seen Nick Caley call a single play. And I know that it's been minimized, but the shoulder thing is still a little bit of a concern as well when it comes to CJ Stroud. So CJ Stroud, number 14, I would say pretty foul. But there are a lot of variables that prevent you from putting him as high up as he was last year when he was firmly in the top 7, top 8 depending on which PFF ranking you looked at. Then we go to the running back. Joe Mixon, really good year last year. Joe Mixon was 15th in the league in rushing, despite missing a few games, 1,043 yards. Texans very dependent on him. Now, he does turn 29 years old tomorrow. That's kind of the area where running backs can kind of fall off. There's been talk that he's been a little bit hobbled. We know they brought in Nick Chubb a couple of weeks ago, but Joe Mixon is ranked as the 17th best running back according to PFF. 17th. There's a lot of really good running backs in this league. If you just go down the list of guys, this is a tough position. I know 17, especially with how important Mixon was last year, might get a lot of people fired up, but it's not too bad, especially when you look at the depth at the running back position. 17 for Joe Mixon. We'll see. I'm sure he hates that. And quite frankly, Joe Mixon's kind of one of those guys who plays better when he's mad. So hopefully this makes him mad for the sake of the Texans. Here's the analysis from PFF on this. Over the past 3 seasons, Mixon has produced an 87.6 PFF rushing grade, the 7th highest PFF WAR among running backs. He's a solid player and can contribute and be efficient on every down. So Joe Mixon, would it surprise me if Joe Mixon is in the top 7, top 6, if healthy? Not at all. We see how important Joe Mixon is and how good Joe Mixon is. He actually finished pretty strong last year in the postseason as well. So that just kind of speaks to, I think, perhaps trying to forecast a fall off, which typically happens when you turn 29, you're pushing 30. But Mixon kind of defied that last year when he was on the field. Now we go to wide receiver Nico Collins. This is what they had to say about Nico Collins before we give the ranking. His combination of speed and size and route running makes him a true number 1 option. Over the past 2 seasons, his 95.3 receiving grade against single coverage, ranked second only to A.J. Brown. So where did they put Nico Collins? They put him at 7th best wide receiver. I think this is fair. The only question really about Nico Collins when CJ Stroud's on the field is he going to be on the field with him? Now, 2 years ago, he had his most healthy season in CJ's rookie year, still missed 2 games, plus left the Jets game early. Last year, they were without him for a month or so. But Nico Collins, the bottom line is he could easily be a top 5 receiver when he's on the field. 7, especially at, again, another deep position, pretty appropriate. So I would say this is a fair grade for Nico Collins. Next one might kind of surprise you. If I had to guess the most unpopular Texan, just based on comments, the stream, social media, what I hear here, what I see here, the most unpopular Houston Texan right now is Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz had a rough year last year. Maybe he was being asked to do what he shouldn't have been asked to do. Maybe that he was a little bit hobbled and a little bit banged up, but a year after being a top 12 productive tight end, at least fantasy-wise, he wasn't even in the top 20 last year. But PFF surprisingly has some pretty good things to say about Dalton Schultz. They said Schultz has, perhaps surprisingly, I would agree, produced the 7th most PFF WAR over the past 2 seasons while serving as a reliable weapon for QB CJ Stroud. Now, some may argue that last sentence, but PFF has Dalton Schultz closer to what he was 2 years ago than last year. They have him as tight end number 13. And if that happens, I think that's one of the more pleasant surprises of the season for the Texans. Dalton Schultz in this Nick Caley system. They say blocking's non-negotiable. Okay. Hopefully you're not asking him to basically play left tackle like they did last year, but tight end number 13 for Dalton Schultz. Then we go to the offensive line, which sadly is probably in the largest control of the fate of these previously mentioned guys. There's no guard or tackle ranked, not to the surprise of nobody, especially with Laramie Tunsil gone, Titus Howard moving inside, although he definitely wouldn't have been in the top 32. And there's just a bunch of uncertainty at guard. However, Jared Patterson, the only offensive lineman ranked, PFF had this to say about him. During his time as a starter in 2024, Patterson posted a 69.3 PFF pass blocking grade, good for a top 12 mark at the center position from week 10 onward. So Jared Patterson, right now, he's kind of competing for that starting spot. He's definitely been better than Juice Scruggs, but the offensive line as a whole is going to control the fate of all of these rankings. Speaking of them, what do you think of them? Embrace debate. We're a month away from camp. Enjoy it. embrace debate. CJ Stroud, Joe Mixon, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz. The offensive line, what did PFF get wrong? I would say they definitely kind of sleeping a little bit on Mixon, CJ Stroud as well. Nico about right. Dalton Schultz, And then the offensive line, yeah, kind of a cluster. Subscribe, like, right along. Always remember when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Appreciate y'all for coming through.